Listen to the vibes.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Listen to the Vibes. And I'd like to welcome Mr. Marc Went here. And he is a men's wisdom coach and a transformation agent provocateur. Almost couldn't say that. What in the world is that?
The idea is to create a little bit of discomfort in people and provoke them to shift into becoming their greatest potential.
Okay. And what got you into all of this?
Well, I hit this point about 10 years ago where my marriage ended and my really cool film job ended. And I was like, what am I going to do? And so I started figuring out how I contributed to the demise of my marriage. The career thing had changed beyond the circumstances of my control, so I wasn't too worried about that. But I was looking for something more powerful. After that experience, I was like, what am I going to do that's going to give me as much excitement and feel as fulfilling? With my wife, however, I wanted to know how I'd shown up as a man that contributed to the demise. I didn't just want to say, she's all wrong and just leave it at that. I wanted to know myself. And so I started going to do men's work, with different forms of that. One of which was something called the razor's edge, where I got challenged in my masculine stature. And that was led by a man named Ken Blackman. During that work, I found myself actually asking really powerful questions of the other men. And Ken, who I'd known for a while, said, "Oh, you've got a pretty good aptitude for this. You should consider coaching." And I was like, great. And about 6 months later, he invited me to join a year-long training program with him and another person. And I studied coaching and practiced coaching for about a year. And then I got the certification from that. Then I also got a meditation instructor certification. And then about 5 years later, I got the men's wisdom work certification. And those three things really galvanized my skill set and the way that I practice the actual coaching sessions. And so I launched my business in 2018, and here I am.
We're from that generation where men are pretty much told to suck it up. You don't really show your feelings and you hold everything in. And then there comes a point where it just seems like everything hits you all at once and you kind of lose it. And I guess my point is there a line between actually showing your feelings and, you're being too much of a whinehead?
Well, yeah, there's skillful means, skillful communication. And one of the things that happened, I think, in our culture is we encouraged a generation of men to be soft and have feelings. And they gave something very powerful up in that, which is the more traditional masculine spine, stature, structure, pushing through difficulty, that kind of thing. The thing about those ideas is if you go to one end or the other end of the spectrum too much, it's not functional. It is not what you would call true masculine leadership, to be all up in your feelings all the time. Nor are you capable of being a leader if you are unable to access your emotions, because you're biologically wired to have emotions. So the skill is knowing when and with whom and then how to communicate properly the things that you need to communicate. For instance, I don't train any of my clients to process their emotions with the woman in their life, with their partner. I have men who get into men's work and we work together to understand what our emotions are doing and how they're operating. Now, that doesn't mean you don't say what you're feeling in the right moment with your woman. But when you want to question everything and you're feeling really messed up and you have to process with someone, you don't do that with your primary relationship unless it involves her in a direct way. And then you have to be really skillful in how you approach it. But if you're producing and you're protecting and you're providing for your family, each family member needs to know that being human involves having emotional communication in, emotional intelligence. And it's okay to say, right now I'm experiencing this. As long as you don't embody weakness when you do it, it's actually more powerful and more strength to be able to communicate that information effectively, succinctly, and in a way that serves moving you through a process. So you just have to learn a little bit about how to do that.
Here's a problem that I have. You know, my masculinity was always defined by the way I took care of my family. I was the provider. I was the guy that got up early in the morning, went to work, busted my butt, and brought home a paycheck. And a few years ago, I developed a disease in my spine, which kind of knocked me for a loop. I had to retire, and I can't do the things I was able to do before. And I feel emasculated from it. How do I deal with that?
Mm. Well, thank you for being so transparent about your experience. Um, the emotion of feeling emasculated is a kind of self-judgment. And so you have wrapped up your identity and your personal value in a set of behaviors as if that defined your value. The truth is, you are inherently valuable as a man to your family unit. And the feeling of emasculation would be something to explore a little deeper, to get a little more specific about. But what's really going on is my sense of it is you don't feel like you have access to productivity and protection for your family because of the physical limitations you experience. And I think that's not true at a certain level. You just have to adapt, right? We're biological beings. We have to adapt to changing circumstances. The person that had the grit to get up and do his job and to make sure that stuff was handled, that person still exists. You just have a range of capacity that's been, impacted by your injury. So your emasculation is not real. You just have a limited range of what you can do. So what do you do with that? Well, hopefully you've developed social networks, brotherhoods, where areas where you need men to assist you, men that you trust, you can bring into that. Now, not every arena is something where you can ask a brother for help. So we'd have to get into the nuances of it, but the idea that you identify as emasculated, the belief, that's where you're probably not accurately correct. It's probably not true, but something in you has defined a range of behaviors as the limit of what that is. And that probably isn't the case. That limit is probably not real. And in our the context of how the family unit runs, for generations we kept the elders in the home, and we had networks that formed around either our spiritual beliefs or other things like Kiwanis or Rotarians or different things. And so we rely on each other. Now, in the American archetype, it's the lone hero. And we've sort of adopted that as the defining nature of what it means to be competent. And we forget that that's actually one level above competent. It's heroic when you do it all by yourself. And so one of the challenges for men is to build in the kind of community, the kind of broad family base that helps as we age provide the kinds of foundations that we need. So when you're young, you want to build a good foundation. You want to create a retirement. You want to do these things. And if you don't do that, and you're still in a place where you have to earn income, well, then you use other aspects of your talent, your wisdom, to create income. And so for you, Kyle, I don't know much about your life, but just hearing what you said about your life in construction and in water, there's a book in you. You could talk about what you learned from being a tradesman and contribute to apprenticeships. You could help younger men learn what it means to provide and to then create the opportunities for themselves that they may not be seeing in this sort of Netflix and chill and video game world that we have right now. And
Right.
so don't underestimate your value as a wisdom keeper. And it's a little tricky. Like right now, podcasting makes sense to monetize things, but that game is also tough. I mean, it's not easy to make a lot of money in that game, and
Sure.
neither is it to be an author. But with technology, it's never been easier. So the opportunities for you are actually quite varied. And it's really about moving into that state of mentorship where your value can be transmitted through bringing in the workability of other men.
Well, we have definitely come into a different age. I know that the women's liberation and all that's been around for a long time, but it's like taking a whole different form. And now we have a generation of younger kids or younger males that are a little more reluctant into finding relationships because, I mean, it's confusing. You know how it was. We were raised to open a door for a lady and you paid for the date, and you know how things were. And now it's almost offensive to open a door for a lady or do those kind of things. What do you say to this new generation?
Well, what I say is the discomfort that you feel, and I'm speaking to the younger generation right now, while the outward appearance of why you feel that discomfort might have changed form, the discomfort isn't any different than any other generation. It's always been about learning what the magic of courtship was like for our particular era. So if you go back, you and I, we're children of the 60s. I was born in 63. I'm guessing you're not too far from that.
A little bit later than that.
Right. So before us in the 1920s, there were a whole different set of rules about dating and about how you spoke to women, right? And before that, there was an even deeper set of rules. So the complexity has always been there. And just like with any other evolutionary process, it's up to us as the males to figure out the context we're in and become effective at creating the way that we create relationships. So, as an older person, a wisdom keeper myself, one of my jobs is to help men create those opportunities. And one of my axioms is if you think you can or you think you can't, you're right, which basically says mindset is everything. If you believe that the situation, because of whatever, women's liberation, gender fluidity, whatever you want to call into the discussion, then that belief dominates the way that you show up, then that's the result you're going to get. Now, there's no cookie cutter answer because women aren't monolith. Women are different from coast to coast, north, south, country to country. And so the thing you need to become is who you are. And when you get clear on what are my core values, what do I want for my life, what am I willing to do, how hard am I willing to work to create that? What am I willing to do in the relationship arena to court and inspire and bring to light a woman's interest in me? It's just like anything else. You can sit home all day and complain about the context you're in, but that isn't going to make it work. You have to become the thing that magnetizes women to you. And there's a lot of different ways to look into that. And, there's a lot of people. Personally, I don't particularly like pickup artistry because to me, that's psychological manipulation for sexual favor.
Hmm.
I don't see that as a valid or valuable in my set of values. That's really just about kind of roboticizing sexuality in other women and manipulating them and hurting them. And I don't think that's really what men want. They just don't feel empowered. They don't feel the power of their capacity to create. And when you don't feel access to the power to create, and that hits you in all arenas, that's in your work life, that's in your relationship life, it's in your spiritual life. So you have to do the work. And men like me and men like you, we owe it to the younger generations to inspire them to believe it's possible and then to help them overcome, this thing. right? This is
Right.
really changing the way humanity. And if you're just listening to the podcast, I held up my Apple iPhone and it's causing harm, but it's not irreparable harm. If you want to be a victim and blame your phone or blame society or blame this or that thing, then that's on you.
Right.
And that's one of the reasons when I got divorced, I was like, I want to figure this out. I want to know who I wasn't being in my relationship that created that. So I can really see, well, okay, this was the part where she failed, and here's the part where I failed. And when I looked at what it was, I was like, well, I'm not settling for this in myself. And honestly, I had the most exciting dating life after my 21 years of marriage that I'd ever had in my life because I did the work.
Mm-hmm.
So young men out there, women are their biology is millions of years old, and our social construct is only at 120 at best years old. Their bodies, their neurology pretty much works the same as it did when your grandfather and great grandfather was creating families. You just have to learn how to unlock that in the current social context. And if you want help with that, you can reach out to me. I definitely can help you with that.
But are you seeing more kids, or should I say males nowadays, that are less interested in having relationships?
I think there's a percentage of that. And what that happened, the way that's working is dopamine, the thing that brings us pleasure or instant gratification is way more available through the phone and through the internet. And so, whether that's internet gaming or porn or whatever it is that's having you feel satisfied in the moment with instant gratification, that is debilitating your capacity to have a vision and a drive to actually go out and do the work over a long time to build something that creates the thing that you want. And so if it takes more than a day or an hour to kind of try and figure it out or work it out, most guys are giving up too soon, and they're using an excuse of whatever thing they're using it as an excuse to say it won't work. And it's not true. There are millions of hungry women who want powerful young men who will show up with a broad spectrum of capacity, strength, a spine, perseverance, dedication, power, but also emotional intelligence, heart in their head, courage, and then a willingness to be transparent. A lot of people would use the word vulnerability there. I don't particularly like that word. Transparent means honest, integral, and
Mhm.
capable of discussing what the impact is of your emotional life in a way that's reachable and creates empathy and creates resonance. And that's where romance lives, is a strong young man who is dedicated and devoted to creating something with his life, who has the capacity to then show his heart to a woman who's interested. That just will melt her because it's the whole dynamic. And you don't have to be locked into old ideas of masculinity, what David Data referred to as first stage masculinity, or this old paradigm of the stoic guy who was unfeeling and couldn't be moved. And you don't have to occupy that space to actually be powerful and execute and produce in your life. It's not a zero-sum game, it's an infinite game.
I think that there was a generation of guys who made you think that to be a real man, you had to sleep around with a bunch of women and all that. I think that's a person with less confidence, and a man with real confidence, a real man, doesn't need to cheat.
Yeah, if you're cheating, then you're cheating yourself,
Hmm.
because there's something you want that you aren't able to create in the context of the relationship you're having. And if you don't have the skills or the commitment to actually have the conversation with the partner you're with and either figure out that, A, this isn't going to work for me, and so I need to move on, or B, I can improve this and here's how, then you're not playing full out. You're not being the best man you can be. You're using your weakness as a cop out to go and produce pleasure. And cheating is just another form of dopamine addiction.
And I also think that you need to close that first door before you open the next one.
Well, I would agree, generally speaking. And now I do want to bring something radical in, which is this idea that is pretty popular in Utah, which is that you might be someone who can have more than one woman in your life. And one of the things about our country is that we have freedom. And if that's works for you, if having two wives works for you, then who am I to say anything wrong? But I'll tell you, man, being productive, present, powerful, and emotionally available to one woman is challenging enough for me. I don't need more than that. But if you're not operating from a dominator kind of slaver mentality where the women are your property, and you can still have rich, rewarding relationships with more than one woman, as long as everybody knows, I personally don't see an issue with that. But I'll tell you this, it's not just I need twice the skill level. You need exponentially more skill level. It's 10 to the 2. It's not 10 times 2. Because the level of complexity, human beings are infinitely complex. So if you have two major relationships in your life, you've got double infinity of complexity, not just it's not easy, but it's worth it. I would say the keys are self-knowledge, self-refinement, and like diet. And I mean diet in terms of food and exercise, but in terms of what you let yourself look at. If you got your face in your phone more than a couple hours a day, then something's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
If you're playing video games more than, an hour a day, then you're not going to be building the skill set unless you're going to write video games, unless you're going to be a video game designer, right? Or if you're watching movies all day or TV all day, unless you're going to be making movies as what you're doing, then you're actually just wasting all of that juice, all of that power on something that you'll never get back from. We are creators, and we're not training our young men how to access that very well. I think there's pockets of it. And I think if you go to certain communities where you see intact families, you see men teaching their sons how to build a life, and whether that's a physical thing, carpentry, or working on their cars or whatever, sports, but it's also, what does it take to study hard enough to get into college? And then, if you're not going to go to college, to develop an apprenticeship that's you actually get through and you meet and you reach journeyman status, and then you can do things, you can make things, you know, and the truth is, if young men are falling down, it's old men's fault,
I can agree to that.
and we have to do better.
Yeah.
And so that's why when I figured out that I could be a men's wisdom coach, I was like, yeah, this has value. It's not just a way to make money, it's a way to make an impact. And at that point, I was all in. I'm like, I'm going all in on this because I can see. And it's amazing to witness the transformations of these young men and these older men as they build these capacities. And whether you already have a lot of masculine power and strength and you want more emotional intelligence, or whether you're kind of a softy and you're really emotional, but what you really want to build is masculine power, either one of those situations, I can be an enormous help to you. And where you end up is that you can actually show up in the moment exactly in the most productive and sophisticated way. So if emotional intention and emotional intelligence is called for, you have it. You have access to those communication skills. If stalwart, stoic strength and perseverance and productivity are needed, then you have access to those and you know who you are.
If someone wants to talk to you, but they're a little reluctant, do you have maybe some way that they can talk to you ahead of time before they decide to use your services?
Yeah, everybody is always invited to a 1 hour introductory conversation, and it's free. And I call it a connection call.
Mm-hmm.
And generally speaking, we just talk about what the circumstances are and what it is they want for themselves. And once I get to know them, there's a couple of things that I look for. Number one, Do I have the capacity, the skills to meet what I'm hearing is the issue for them. Because my core value is if I can't help someone, it doesn't do me any good to sign them up. Number two, are they committed? Will they do the work that I give them? Or do they just want to come into a space and talk about things and then feel like they did the work? Because that doesn't do you any good or me any good either. So that it's a conversation. I I figure out kind of what it is they need, where they are on the spectrum of stoicism versus emotionalism. And then if there's a resonant place where both of those two conditions are met, then we talk about the offer. And a lot of times I provide value even on that call. Like I've had people who don't work with me who still walk away with some actionable things that they can do. And then my time's not wasted because if I'm going to spend an hour with someone, um, that counts. My hours are precious and I want to make an impact even in that situation. And those are my core values and how I operate.
Did I read correctly? You're writing a book?
Yes, there's a book called Coding for Intimacy that's I'm working at slowly. I keep revising it because I keep getting smarter and needing to put new stuff in it. I'm I'd say about a third of the way through it, and it's based on the idea that men like systems,
Mhm.
we like strategies and things like that, but intimacy is much more fluid and less systemic. You can't apply a formula to emotions effectively, especially with women. So coding for intimacy is kind of a paradox, right? It's this idea of, well, what are the systems I can use to give me the best possible ability to meet that vast array of possibilities that shows up as non-calculable, or, you can't always go slot A to or tab A, slot B, result C. That's not how women work. That's not how life works. But you can develop ways to systematize your own daily practices, your own ability to understand your own emotional content, and how to navigate communication when you get triggered or when you feel anger or when you feel sadness or jealousy in a way that's effective and represents you in the best possible way to be productive and a provider and a protector in your life. So I'm working on that. I'm also working on a film. It's not really related to my coaching ideas. It's just, it's an action drama, and that's moving along, and I'm making progress there as well.
So- But you do more than just men and women's relationships. You also work on relationships in business as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, I call myself a men's wisdom coach, but I look for executive coaching jobs, and the reason I do is because men who are leading other men in industry or in enterprises
Mhm.
often are faced with the double whammy challenge of how do I keep my team motivated and productive and also keep my family intact? And typically that man is at work and he's overwhelmed with work, but he's worried about home because he isn't actually meeting his objectives or his obligations or even just having as much fun as he and his wife would like to have at home. And if you're at work worried about home and you're at home worried about work, neither one is being handled properly. And so the answer to that is to have a level of emotional intelligence I call professional intimacy, so that when you're at work, you're motivating your people through emotional connection within the framework of professionalism, because you don't want to be all ooey gooey at work. It's not real. It's not the way to be. It's not effective. But people don't perform at their best just because you're paying them well or because they might get fired. When you inspire them with a vision and they get the mission, that's an emotional state. And then you get the best work out of them. And then at home, having access to emotional intelligence at home can create high level emotional intimacy through the same language skills, the same self understanding, the same kind of empathetic responses, and the ability to show up as needed. So if your wife wants you to show her romance and show her that, you have the ability to do that without losing your strength and without losing your sense of masculinity. And if she's challenging you and you're a little bit, maybe you're feeling a little something, you don't lose your structure and your spine so that you can be a powerful man holding up the home and have access to the head, heart, and balls that you need to be able to create the life that you want.
What is your website?
It's my name, MarcWendt coaching.com, marcwendtcoaching.com.
And what about your social media?
Oh, I'm on all of them, I think. So yeah, you can find me in any of them. But you could also, if you're listening to this, you can just call me 415-328-7668. That's 415-328-7668. I'll take your call if I'm not busy, and we'll book a time where we can sit down for an hour and talk. I'm a pretty straightforward guy. It's easy to access me.
Cool. I will put all the links in the description to make it easy for folks to find you. Oh, but and what is your email?
Marc at marcwendtcoaching.com. It's Marc with a C.
I will definitely put all of that in the description. But Marc, thanks, man. I appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, thanks for what you're doing, Kyle, and congratulations on finding something to put your energy into, and don't stop there.
Well, being a grandpa, you got to put the energy into that for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here with you. I enjoyed the conversation. Thanks for your hospitality and your pointed questions. Thank you.
Oh, appreciate you, man. And I also want to thank all you folks out there. If you are new to the channel, I hope you'll come back. Please hit that subscribe button. From our regulars, you guys are awesome because you make it possible for me to do this. Until the next one, everyone, please take care. Be kind to one another. God bless and peace.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Listen to the Vibes. You can catch us on Buzzsprout or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts, and on YouTube. Follow us on Facebook at The Vibes Broadcast Network